Such interesting times. I think I've been now with the realtors for 15 years, and I usually hear, oh yeah, you know, I've lived through this cycle before, or that cycle. These past 2 years, I hear people in the industry for 30 years telling me, I've never seen anything like this, Peter. I've never seen a market like this. I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's going to happen. And I think there's a lot of that going on. So we've got some awesome speakers that we're going to bring on. I'd like to thank first and foremost our sponsor, UtahRealEstate.com. We got Brad Bellick, CEO. They're always so awesome to sponsor our events, and really, and I know this sounds self-serving, but they are maybe the best MLS in the nation. And as I travel and meet with colleagues around the country, it is always just a reminder to me of how awesome our MLS is, and Brad's a big part of that, and we hope he stays around forever. Your wife's from here. She's not going to let you. Alright. We'll keep working that anyway. So thank you to our real estate. Hey, as we're going and the economy changes, I just want to throw a plug in. As you see, so I'm on the forums committee for the UAR. I worked at the forums for all 15 years I've been with the realtors. Use that legal hotline. If you don't already use it and give us feedback to how forums are working or being used in this market. I mean, we've seen a lot. We saw that COVID addendum. We saw that weird appraisal addendum come out during COVID, during this crazy market. So those are all results of the feedback we get from our membership. So keep giving that and allow us the good feedback to keep using forums. I don't know what we're going to see. Wraps. We're going to see a lot of seller financing with this market changing. I don't know what we're going to see, but for sure there will be reaction on the forums front. So keep that feedback coming. And the legal hotline is one of the greatest forms of that feedback that we have. All right, I'm not going to mess around any longer because our first speaker has places to be. I'm thrilled we got Mr. Daniel Hemmert I, Esquire. Dan is an awesome guy. I met Dan in junior high, actually. Lakers Leopards, for him. And then we reconnected in law school. And Dan quickly became one of my favorites. And you know, when you stand in the right places, even if you're kind of a putz like me, you get to rub shoulders with greatness by just being in the right place sometimes. That's how I felt. Standing next to Dan. But Dan became one of my favorites in law school. I just loved the way he thought. And Dan's got such a wealth of experience. He, right after law school, took off and lived in, was it Switzerland? Switzerland? But Italian-speaking Switzerland? I've never really, German-speaking Switzerland? I don't understand Switzerland. But they speak different languages in different parts of Switzerland. Dan lived there doing investment banking, is that? Finance, asset management. Then he came here back to the U.S. and ran another asset management company. This was my first experience with somebody that I knew having an assistant. I walked into his, he was at the top of one of those buildings in Salt Lake, and we were going to lunch with him, and we showed up, and the lady would not let us get into his office. Dan was too important. It's who we did. I was very impressed. He's out of law school, so he got cards. And then Dan went and started owning dry cleaners and stuff. The state grabbed him because he was too good. So he's now the director of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. You got that right, okay? Opportunity, not development anymore. Opportunity. And so Dan oversees really the promotion of Utah and the economic development in Utah and policy affecting that. So we thought it would be awesome to have Dan here. To me, the missing piece in the affordable housing crisis is the question of what happens if we do not address it. And the economic impacts are a part of that. And so, even though this is a housing summit, I really wanted Dan to come talk to us about the economic outlook, because it's what's caused the demand in Utah. And if we turn that away, what happens? And so, I don't know, I told Dan to talk about whatever he wants, and he's going to talk about whatever his assistant made slides for. So, I'll let him, I won't set up too much, but we thank Dan for being here, and appreciate him. We'll give him the mic.
Peter's effectively paid me as a total jerk, so no, but I have him here for a long time. He's a great guy, and I noticed that Peter is actually the guy that I want to hang out with in law school because he's actually moderately interesting, and everyone else can go to law school but not. Okay, so when Peter asked me if I would do this, I had one requirement: I would not speak after someone from Mackenzie Gardner Institute, and they're coming next. Because half of my slides come from Mackenzie Gardner Institute. And I did this once when I spoke after the guy from Mackenzie Gardner Institute, what we did. And we had the exact same slides, and it was awful. It was really awkward, and I made up new things on the same slides. And with that, we're just jumping into it. Okay, so I'm the executive director of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. We used to be the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Really quickly, just talk about that. We changed the name because development seems like a very impersonal, project-oriented focus. And we felt like the state was at a place, especially with Governor Cox coming in, we wanted to focus more on people. And that word opportunity is a very small change, but when you look at the word opportunity, you naturally think of people. Whereas when you look at the word development, you naturally think of projects. And we wanted to orient more toward people, so opportunity for all. I believe that fundamentally a government exists to promote public economic activity and ability. So Peter also, he asked me, he said, hey, we can talk, and he told me and James to talk about the exact same stuff. So I said, one, I won't do it unless I'm not before Jim, and then two was, I don't want to talk about the same stuff as Jim. And so, not because Jim's going to be good, his stuff's going to be good, but I wanted something different. And so Peter did say, why don't you talk about kind of why we care about housing affordability. And I'm not going to use the word affordable housing. I don't use that phrase anymore. Affordable housing is a legal term. It's a federally defined term for what we used to call low-income housing. And we don't call it that anymore. So housing for lower income people matters, but it's one piece of a spectrum that fits into housing affordability. And so all income levels need a place, need a range of housing. And there should be housing for a just out of college, or even just out of a trade school, or even just out of a high school. There should be housing available for them. Also though, when you're like Peter Christensen and you're running, the Realtors Association, and you're ready for the big spread, there should be housing also for Peter. But anyway, we need the whole range. And we need people to sell the houses. So that's where it fits. Okay, so why do we care? So the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, what do we do? So we have programs that maybe some of you have heard of. We do corporate recruitment, we do state promotion. But really, when you boil down, what is our purpose to exist? We're charged with stewardship over the state economy and quality of life. So we understand we're not businesses, we're not entrepreneurs, we're bureaucrats. That said, we can foster an ecosystem or foster an environment through policy, through state policy, and interacting with businesses such that the economy continues to progress and grow, which it does. Wages continue to increase, which they do. Economic activity continues to occur, which it does. And we try to balance that. This is a new thing. Since, again, Governor Cox won an election, we're now balancing that against quality of life. So historically, the Governor's Office of Economic Development cared about one thing, and that was jobs. We still care about jobs. But we feel like we're at a place where we can start caring about quality of life as well. So balancing that, the jobs, against cost of congestion, against access to outdoor recreation, against against, what the impact's going to be on schools, on other things that we all care about. So we're trying to do more of a balance. And we feel like that's our mission. We're the stewards of the economy, recognizing that private business is the economy. And then lastly, we feel like our job is to future-proof the economy. We're not worried about y'all or me even, or my job. What we are worried about is the next generation. We want to make sure they have quality opportunities for work and life, which includes housing. Why do we care about housing? So number one, traditionally, housing and home ownership in the United States has been the gateway to the middle class. It's, you all know this, you work in this world, it's a forced savings account. It provides some stability where you live, and that matters. But on top of that, home ownership traditionally has been a forced savings account. You're paying down a mortgage, you're building up equity, you are to a degree hedged against inflationary pressures, and that creates a more stable financial situation and allows you to enter into the middle class. And so that's a big deal for us, and that's why we worry about it. It also, because affordability matters, because if your housing consumes too much of your income, you don't have income left for anything else. And we care about that because, one, your quality of life decreases significantly. But also, if you don't have any discretionary income left, it's harder for you to consume goods and services, which we are a consumer-driven economy, and so we need you consuming for our economy to be successful. In addition, if you have excess, in addition to the forced savings account the house itself requires, if you have extra income, you can start saving for retirement and also just in general saving for investment, which again is another component into how we hope our economy will grow. I'm just going to read this next one. Households can afford homes, and at 5%, right, 71% of Utah households are priced out. We're 5.5, so we're higher. And that basically means, going back to that first slide, fewer people, it's harder for more people to access the middle class, it's harder for more people to do that savings account. And that we view as a major problem. So as a state, we're getting more and more energized toward trying to encourage local land use authorities to approve more housing. And you all see this, and I'm going to get to this at the end of this presentation. And if I haven't offended half of you by the end of this, then I didn't do my job. But we see what we're seeing is more and more locals not wanting the type of housing that's next in the chain, that's missing at the highest level, which is traditionally that first house, which could be a condo, could even be an apartment, to then transition into a condo later. So this is another stat that's important. So going back to that first slide and sticking with this theme, what happens to wealth based on home ownership? So this is home ownership. This chart, these are renters, okay? So this is their wealth that they accumulated at different wage bands. You can't see them all. I think this was 192 over 192. I think this is smaller. The second one, I won't do all of them, but the second one is 127 to 192. So this is 127 to 192, 192 and over, and then a smaller range, below 100 up to 127. And so we care about this because you can see here, if you own your home, look at the level of wealth you have. The orange is the wealth in your home. So how much of your net worth is represented by your home itself? And the vast majority of wealth in America is held by homeowners. And in many cases, it's the only wealth they hold. As their income goes up, you can see they start making other investments, they get some more discretionary income, maybe they have a bigger 401k, some of their wealth moves outside the home. And it's not until you get over almost a $200,000 income that you see people having more wealth outside their homes than in their homes. This green line is renters. So renters do accumulate wealth as their income increases, but without that big home ownership piece, the equity in their home, they just don't accumulate enough, the same amount of wealth over their life. And then this chart just shows how wealth is distributed in Utah households. So here's this is 127 to 192. So 15% of Utahns fit there. 8.3% fit there, and it's biggest buckets this one are 25%, and then 26. So 50% of Utahns fit in these two ranges. And so we're motivated if we're looking for financially stable individuals in society. We're looking for people to be able to accumulate wealth, to not just to be more stable and happier. We're motivated from a policy perspective to facilitate homeownership. So this chart didn't pull up. What you see here is like, oh, just someone made it fun. So Utah housing gap. So this is the other big thing that we see that's driving, that's creating a major problem with price appreciation of homes. This shows households and household growth, the number of dwelling units that are added each year, and this line represents the shortfall in housing units per household each year. So you can look here in 2020, that's last year, this came from Kenzie, I think this last year was updated. There was a 44,500 unit shortfall in the state of Utah. So 44,000 houses, dwelling units, short relative to the number of households that are being created. So these are people that are going out to live on their own. One fallacy that I want to break right now, most of the household growth, if you look back over that same time period, 75% of that growth came from our basements, meaning it's our kids. There are people who move here from out of state. We're one of the highest in return to state, in migration states, but over that time period, 75% of it came from, it was homegrown. And of the 25% that came from out-of-state move-ins, 25% of that were people returning home, meaning they were people who grew up in, or were born in Utah, left, and came back. So one year, I was not living here. Well, it's here. I would have been an in-migrant, even though I grew up here, went to school here, and lived in Utah. I would have been still considered an in-migration. Now that's changed. Last year, for the first time, we had more in-migration than in-state created households, but and that trend may continue, may not, we're not sure. But regardless, historically, the growth that we all see, we're all experiencing, we all angst over, most of that still is coming out of our basements. So when I hear people say, no more growth at a city council meeting, what I like to say is you can only make that argument if you're willing to take that to the next step and say no more kids. Because if you aren't going to say that, you can't say no more growth. No one wants to say no more kids. This next chart is now projecting forward. So this year, I believe I heard that we're going to see about 14,000. This gap decreased by about 14,000 units. Does that sound right? So that's great. So it's we're building our way out of it, and we all are seeing this, right? Those are probably apartments right there. They're everywhere. We're seeing them everywhere. And we're seeing more and more housing being built, and that's great. But we still have this gap, and there may be about 30,000 units of the gap. And then if you look forward, so this is 2021 to 2030, the number of households projected over that period is an additional 250,000 house units. And so we can't stop building. You can't say no growth. The growth is coming. You can't just say no growth, we're not going to grow here. Because it's coming whether you want it or not. So the way I like to describe it is you can either plan for it, or you can manage it. An analogy I heard that I really liked was from the mayor of Mill Creek. He lives at the base of Mount Olympus. Every year Mount Olympus has runoff that comes off. And he says, I live at the base of Mount Olympus. And the way I view growth is the way I view the runoff. It's coming. It'll come whether I want it or not. And I can either build canals and channel that growth or that runoff where it makes more sense to go, or I can just let it flood my city. The runoff is coming either way, and growth is the same way. You can either manage it and plan for it, and you can maintain single-family housing neighborhoods. You can have higher density, more affordable housing, or houses that are more affordable in areas of high traffic, near transit hubs, like near front-runner hubs or tracks hubs. And you can be smart about planning, but you have to plan for this happening no matter what. Just to say, we don't want a community that grows, so, this is the problem. This is where I hope I offend everyone. This is our problem. This is not my backyard mentality. I've been to so many land use authority meetings, and I'm sure you all go to them too. And I'm engaging with you, like, turn it off! But I'm sure you've all gone. You've probably even done this. I've done this. Developers coming in, there's a new project that's going to include some density. And we all show up, it's going to ruin the neighborhood, don't do it, city council member. But we usually preface our comments with this statement first. And I've heard this 100,000 times. I support density. I support affordable housing, just not right here. And that's what everyone says everywhere. And if everyone's saying that everywhere, it doesn't work. And so the state and local governments are involved in the development process because they manage zoning and permitting. And because of that, the state and local governments have to be involved. And the problem we see is this last little bit. You see most of the negative comments around growth stem from misperceptions. And negative perceptions and worst case scenario perceptions that are projected forward. Like water, that's one we hear a lot about. We're gonna run out of water. Water is a problem in the state of Utah. We see a declining amount of water. But it's not enough. Over the same time period, we've been seeing this, we're in a 1,200-year drought, right? Even though the state's total aggregate water amount has been declining every year, and it's concerning, we're worried about it, we're working on it. As much as 85% of the state's water is in agriculture. Humans, all of us everywhere, consume somewhere between 3 and 6% of the state's water. It's not driving, it's not a problem. And in addition, over the same time period where we see water decline, municipal water supplies have actually increased. Because as property converts from irrigation land into either homes or commercial, the water usage drops significantly. Home is like 1 acre home, so you can quarter acre lots, whatever. They use 1/10 of water than they used before as farmland. And so you see the municipal water supply is increasing, even though total water is decreasing. So that's why we hear all the time, we can't keep growing, we're running out of water. The state does have a water problem, but it's not driven by human consumption, nor is it driven by industry consumption. It's driven by the farm, and that's great. I'm not against farms. If you have farms, they're wonderful. We love them, part of our heritage. But that's the problem. So last thing I'm going to talk about, again, going to these land use authorities. What we're trying to have people stop saying is not in my backyard and start saying yes in my backyard. And the challenge we see is at land use authorities, land use community meetings, community impact input is actually not helping the process because the negative is overrepresented and the positive is underrepresented because we as current home owners only see the negative of the new project. It impacts us and our perception-wise only in a negative way. The potential new homeowners or residents, in the case of an apartment, who are going to live there, they don't get to come to land use authority, right? They don't live here yet. And so the bill, we need more and more and more, and we're not even close to where we need to be, and I hope that all y'all will go to your next planning commission or city council, and instead of saying, I support affordable housing, just not right here, you actually say, yes in my backyard, I support affordable housing, or not affordable housing, I support density, I support more affordable and more available housing right here in our area, and I hope you guys, plan use authorities will vote for it too. That's it. So, here you go.
Our next presenter, we use that cliche, someone who needs no introduction, but I think really Jim Wood needs no introduction. He's the smartest economist certainly in the state of Utah, maybe the world. And he's been the premier authority on economic data in Utah. He's been with the Kenneth C. Gardner Institute for I don't know how long. Long time?
Long time.
I think they're going to rename it the Jim Wood Institute.
I don't have the money for that.
But we sure appreciate him counting. And early on we booked him, back-to-back years, and I thought, oh, okay, we need to get someone different. And I did a little impromptu poll. I see people shaking their heads in their hair saying, no, we want him back every year we can get him. And so we keep bringing Jim back, and we're never disappointed. So we'll bring Jim Wood up.
It's great to be back. I'm a little gimpy. I have a new knee, about 5 weeks out, and it's feeling good now. The first 2 weeks were really rough, particularly managing pain medication. It's not easy. So I hope to stay upright for all of this, but just to follow up on what Dan was saying on a few things. First of all, on the housing shortage, we have had in the last 3 years, from really 2018, more housing units built than we've had households. So that housing shortage has been shrinking a bit. My best estimate is we're probably still maybe 20,000 units short. That would make a healthy housing market. That would be about 2% of the total housing units in Utah. We got about 1 million housing units. So we probably need another 20,000, I think, to really make for a healthy market. Now, this last year we had a real good year in construction, 40,000 new units, and households somewhere around 26,000, 27,000. But those were permits, and 14,000 of those permits were apartments. And they'll take a while to get onto the market. So really we don't see the infusion of these new units for particularly the 14,000 apartments for at least a year, sometimes longer than that. A lot of them are in projects that take a long time. So that's eased a bit. What do you have to say about water? I don't know if I probably get in trouble if I go in the ditch because it's not my field. But when I drive north, Jackson or Sun Valley, particularly Jackson, you see those cows in meadows that are this high in grass and there's water, and you drive down to Box Elder County and there's these cows, and they're out there in the dirt. And you gotta wonder in Utah when less than 2% of our personal income comes from agriculture. Agriculture uses well over half the water. And this goes back to the water law, Western water law, which is really complicated. And those who had use, first in use, they have the right. And so there's a market for it. And you talk to the people out in Miller County when IPP went in, and they sold their water rights, Delta, to the IPP. They made a lot of money. But there's going to have to be some sort of reckoning between the use of water and how disproportionate it is, and what we need to keep the Great Salt Lake from drying up, and also to support economic growth. And lastly, what Dan was spending some time on there on housing affordability and the density. What was it, 4 years ago, I guess, or so, there was a big project in Salt Lake County on the West Bench, and it was called Olympia Hills. And this is property that's owned by a family that's been farming that area for years, probably 3 or 4 generations they've had it. And this was a large parcel, and there was going to be high density in some of it. And so they applied, and it was unincorporated Salt Lake County. The Planning Commission for Salt Lake County approved it unanimously. The city or the county council, they approved it unanimously. So it looked like it was a go, but the mayor, who we worked with, and I like him a lot, Ben McAdams, he was in a very tight race with Neil Love. He elected to go back to Washington. And Ben is really, he understands affordable housing and housing affordability, and he's an advocate for that. But in a political environment, when that came up, he ended up, even though unanimous at the Planning Commission, unanimous at the County Council, approval of this large project, he vetoed it and said, we don't have enough study, we need to set it aside. Well, now 4 years later, it looks like it might be coming on different type of project, but it's going to be lower density. But the owners, I'm sure they've lost a lot of money, and they're not going to come on at the right time either. But anyway, that's the issue on on housing affordability as well as affordable housing. It's very difficult because of the political environment. And I was on a panel with the owner of that property, the developer. He's in his 70s, and this was 2 or 3 years ago. He said, I'm really naive. I didn't really understand what social media was. And he said, after approval and it became public, within 10 days, the whole west side, Riverton and South Jordan and Harriman, rose up against the consequences of how they perceived this project. So, it's a tough, really tough issue. But we have made headway, I think slowly over time. Now we've got the legislature involved, and they passed some legislation on housing, and the philanthropic community is involved. IHC, Ivory Foundation, there's Science Bank. So we've got philanthropic interest, Gail Miller, of course, and then we've got the business interest. The Chamber of Commerce understands the issue of housing affordability, and they've got a gap commission. So there's more interest in this issue than there ever has been. I've been following the issue for a number of years, and it really it's encouraging where we are now. I'll get here to my slides. If this will work, okay. I just want to refresh. This is always a good place to start. The reason, I think probably everyone in here has benefited from what's happened in the last few years, and particularly over long term. Utah's a high growth state, and most Utahns benefit from that. Not all, and that's the worry. Some get left behind, and that's primarily those long-term renters who can never get out of the rental market. But we have, one of the reasons we have high growth is the labor market. We used to survey firms to come to Utah, why you come, and labor is the number one issue. You got labor, and then you got infrastructure, which is next, transportation, and it's just, you can't overstate how important the airport has been to economic development. We lucked out there. The airport, in the 1980s, we had Western Airlines here, and Delta bought Western, and they kept the hub here. There was talk for years, well, they're going to move it to Las Vegas. They never did, and it's really a pillar of our economic growth and development. Demographic growth here, our fertility rate has come down, and you're all aware of that, I'm sure. A lot of it has to do with economics, but 1960s, the typical woman, 16 to 43, would have 4.2 children. Now it's right at replacement, just barely over 2. So demographic growth is going to slow, and it has been slowing, and we're going to see over the long term. If you look at our estimates or our projections for the number of new households in Utah in 2060, it's the same that we've got now. So we have fewer and fewer households. So all of you are living really in a golden period for the real estate industry. I said that in 2006, and that was a great period. But we're 9 years into this now. I mean, it really is crazy. All of those contribute to our economic growth, and we have a persistent, prolonged advantage in terms of growth. And it's a difficult, here's the back side of that, or the dark side of the growth. This shows Utah's housing prices, acceleration. We are really prone to rapid acceleration in housing prices because we are a high growth state. We have been a high growth state back to the 50s. You can take any 10-year period from the 1950s. You can go 58 to 68, or you can go 58 to 78, or you can go 68 to 88, and Utah will be in the top 5 in the country in employment growth. So when you have that kind of growth, even though back then we were a very small state, and you can get really rapid, high rates of growth, we are now a medium-sized state. We're about 30 in population and employment. So we're a medium-sized state, but we're still getting phenomenal. And this is 2021, and Brad here from the MLS. Their data is just so valuable for us, and what we've seen. I ran January to May, and we're still. And I took one effort. I just took the top 5 counties, the 4 Wasatch Front counties, and then Washington County. First 5 months of this year versus the first 5 months of last year, we're up 25%. Now, Brad gave me some right off the boat stuff here. I mean, this is, but these are his. Brad runs the MLS, and so he's got his finger on the pulse. But in just the last 60 days, at a 260% increase in the number of listings. Okay, and the first sign he references here, the first sign really of some price reduction, particularly at the high end. 10 to 15% in the last couple of weeks in housing over $800,000. So we're seeing, and I've heard that anecdote from a few realtors in Salt Lake County that they've seen in Draper, Sandy, and some of those South Jordan, where homes were up to 800, 900,000. They've seen some price reduction. But this is really where we are there at 28.3, and if we, I sure hope we don't get up in the 20s again. It makes for a very unhealthy market for some. All of us who are homeowners in here, we are the beneficiaries. But I guarantee you, a lot of you are going to have to, just what I'm going to have to. I got great grandkids in my basement. We have 3 generations in our house. And I know that the windfall I have received because of housing prices going up is going to have to be given to them in order for them to get into the housing market. And that's called the good old intergenerational transfer of wealth. And we're going to see a lot of that in the next 20 years. If your kids and grandkids get into housing, they're going to need some help. And they're going to take some of your winnings, and you can't spend it all. I mean, we've been really blessed here with, if you live in a high, like I got a brother-in-law who's in real estate, he does really well. And you know, and sometimes I have to kind of pop these balloons and say, Richard, you know, if you were living in Omaha, you wouldn't have any of this. It's flat. You know, your success is really based on where you live and this geography and the growth we've had in the state. If you're in a slow growth state, which is most of middle America, you know, we wouldn't see this increase in wealth. About 28.3%. In these, this period here, well, this first period, we were about 4th or 5th in the country in housing price. We led here for a year, we led here for a year, and we were second here to Idaho. So we are really prone to high rates of growth and high rates of price increase. This, you can tell your clients that, you know, this shows the blue line here is current. So that's in what you call nominal or today's dollars. You know, we just, current dollars. This is the median sales price. The red is inflation adjusted. So that's what we call constant price. In real estate, hardly anybody goes to, they don't look at constant prices. They're, you know, everybody has the frame of reference. Well, my neighbor sold a house 5 years ago for $500,000. Now I'm going to sell mine. So they refer to it as the current price. So what the current price in Utah, long term, 22 years, is 6.6%. That means that housing prices are going to double about every 11 years. About every 11 years. And when people ask me, you know, they'll say, well, so what if we have to rent? Well, as Dan pointed out, it's all about wealth. And if you get in Utah and it's 6.6%, you don't refi and you don't pay seconds and all that, you just pay your mortgage. After 12 years, you're gonna, the housing price, you paid $250 for it, it's now $500. So you got a $250,000 in equity, plus you played down the principal a bit. So you got $300,000. That's the difference between owning and renting, where the renter has really virtually nothing. It's the last, and it's particularly the last 2 years, where it's really, in my mind, it's really been harmful for the next generation. And you can see this sort of hockey stick right here. That's the 25%, 2 years. Just that really makes it difficult. And this is confirmed by media days on market. This is from when listed to under contract, and you can see you go back 20 years. We're at 6 days, and again, this was January to May. Now on the handout I have January to May, and the same with the previous chart. That's January to May. What? Uh-oh. Okay. I expect this is going to change a bit, but you can see even in a run-up to the Great Recession in 2006, we were still in the 30s. And how this is just such an outlier. 6 days, unhealthy. Higher housing prices equal a windfall of wealth. Just looking at Utah County, and you have about 140,000 homeowners in Utah County. Okay, and the average price in 2020 was almost $550,000. Okay, you've got 140,000 households. Total value of those homes is $75 billion. Okay, after 1 year of growth in Utah County, it goes up to $93 billion for homeowners, an increase of $18 billion in Utah County homeowners in wealth. And statewide, it's over 80 billion a year. So that just, I think, underscores what Dan was talking about in wealth. If you're into the market and how you can really benefit from it. And we have a lot of young people. We have about 30 people at our office. And 10 or so, a few years ago, we're trying to get into the housing market. Unfortunately, two of them left Utah to go to markets. Both went to Virginia, where housing prices, to Richmond, Virginia, where housing prices are 2/3 of what they are here, and they could get a larger lot. They wanted to live in Salt Lake City and not have to commute, and they just could not find any housing that was suitable. We don't know how many people are leaving Utah because of housing prices, nor do we know how many people aren't coming back or migrating here. I have a close colleague that I worked with for 30 years at the university. She moved to Chicago 6 or 7 years ago. She got divorced. She'd love to move back to Salt Lake, but she can't afford the housing, so she's moving to Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas, where her sister lives. But she'd love to come back here. So housing, it is changing our migration. But the windfall of wealth is real, but there are those who are left behind. And this is, I ran this a couple of times because it seemed so dramatic. I couldn't think, is this right? But if you look at the median price home in 2017 in Utah County, it was $300,000. Today it's $601,500. The mortgage rate in 2017 in May was 4%. May is 5.23. Nathan just looked up the mortgage rate today, it was 5.87, right? So this is, that's low. Principal and interest, $1,371 and $31.90. Property tax, of course, is determined by the value of the home. So if you were buying a home, the median price home in 2017, about 0.7% is going to be property tax for the year, then divided by 12, so you got $180 a month. And now, because the value is so high, it goes up to $361. And private mortgage insurance pretty much doubled because that's tied to the price of the home. And then homeowners insurance. So basically what you see is a doubling. And that's why 71% or more are excluded. Of course, a lot of those 70, those will come back in if they had to, and if they didn't have the wealth from their house. At debt to income, 36%. Back in 2017, 63,000 to get in. Today, 138. So, and those are looking. I mean, the market for them is really the lower priced housing and the condominium, townhome, twin home market. Does Utah have a housing bubble price increase? These are price increases by housing cycle. And you can see the yellow is where we have, it actually doesn't go negative, but it weakens. That is, the increase in housing prices are less than they were the year before. This red is where housing prices actually went down. They were negative. Now, that's rare in Utah. And the question is, are we in store for housing? Have we created a housing bubble where we are going to see something like this? The definition of a housing bubble, or of a bubble, is that you have, in order to define the bubble, and unfortunately you don't know until after the fact, but it's a prolonged decline, not just deceleration, but a prolonged decline in prices, and in this case, housing prices. And we had that with the Great Recession, where we had 16 consecutive quarters where housing prices went down. And every one of these three periods are associated with a weak job market. Great Recession, we lost 80,000 jobs. That was very severe. The other two, we had pretty much flat growth. We didn't have declining growth, but we had flat growth. My view is that unless we have a serious recession, that we are not going to see housing prices actually decline, but we'll see a moderation and a deceleration of prices. And I think that's where we're headed for. You know, we've had a period now where very low interest rates for a long time. And the Fed takes a beating, and poor Jay Powell, anyway, the chairman, they're really in a tough spot. Go back 2.5 years, 2020, March of 2020, the Federal Reserve has what they call their balance sheet. And at that time, their balance sheet was about $3.5 trillion. So they own a lot of treasury debt. They own a lot of the treasury debt. We get 2020 and we get a pandemic. And in a matter of 90 days, from mid-March to mid-June, they increased their balance sheet by $3 trillion. They come into the economy in a whole bunch of ways and new ways for the Fed. So they get beat up now for that, is that, you know, they put all this money into the economy, and on the other side, the fiscal side, Congress was approving lots of assistance as well. So we had $6 trillion between fiscal and monetary policy infused into the economy. But you got to remember where we were in March of 2020 when we had a pandemic. 3 billion people in the world left the labor market, collectively cooperative. The first time ever that the global economy was shut down on its own. And the Fed had no idea what was in store. And at the same time, the Treasury market was just in free fall. And usually when you have that sort of situation, Treasury interest rates will fall because of uncertainty and pessimism. Then there was a rush to cash. So Treasury rates were going up. And that's what Jay Powell was fighting, because our Treasury notes are really the foundation of the global financial system. And if that froze, then the whole financial system would be in trouble. So they went very aggressively, and in my view, we've got higher inflation, but on the other side, if they hadn't been as aggressive, rather than talking about inflation today, we'd be talking about unemployment. Because we've got an unemployment rate now down under 2% in some counties. So, you know, that's what the Fed has to decide. Unemployment, employment, stable prices. Anyway, the future for interest rates, short term, and we've seen that now, sharp and painful. Long term, and the feeling of a lot of the discussion is that there is a savings glut. There has been a savings glut worldwide for a number of years. And that's what Greenspan fought. In 2005, 2006, he kept trying to raise interest rates. Every time they raised them, they had what we call a tsunami of savings that would flow in and drive rates back down. So he couldn't slow down. As he said, I can't take the punch bowl away from the party. Because what he wanted to do was raise rates, but then this demand would come in, and there's so much savings that it drove down interest rates. Well, long term, we do have a savings glut worldwide. Sovereign wealth funds have trillions of dollars that they have to place. The Saudis have about $1 trillion. The Chinese have $3.2 trillion. Norway has $1.4 trillion. So these countries that export, whether it's natural resources or product, accumulate this huge amount of foreign exchange, savings, well, that they need a place. They need a place at some place. They're not just going to let it sit idle. So they look for investments and they chase yields. And next, we have an aging population worldwide, okay, like in China particularly. And as people age, they save more. And so households aging, even in the U.S., we have an increase in savings. And then penny-pinching households, we've had, well, some of us been let loose in the last few months with the end of the pandemic, but households are in very good shape compared to 2006-07, where we had really imbalance and way too much debt. Shift in demand for capital. Do we need as much capital investment? So we've got all these funds out there, they're looking for yield, but think of the difference between financing Facebook out here in Eagle Mountain versus a manufacturing plant, a GM or a Ford 50 years ago. The capital requirements are so different in a service economy, which we've come to, than they were in another generation, a couple of generations back. So there's not as much demand, but there's all these savings out there. So that helps drive down long-term interest rates. And the greater share of the wealth goes to a higher income, and they have a much higher propensity to save. And corporations, you look at some of the data on corporations, they're flush with cash, and they're a bit reluctant to invest, particularly in the oil industry right now. And last, and I know I've gone too long, Peter, forecast for 2022, a deceleration in prices. I hope by the third and fourth quarter, we're at 10% or less. And some of Brad's numbers that he gave me here, that's an indication. So that I hope for the year we're down around 8 to 10%. Listings are going to double, and that's confirmed by what Brad gave me. Just in the last 60 days, we're up 260%. Days on market, we're at 6 now, and 14 plus. Hedged there a bit, but I think there's a 50-50 chance it'll be higher. Single family sales down near 7,000. They peaked at 8,500 2 years ago. I think it'll be down a little bit. That's more consistent with 2018, 2019. Condo, twin homes, townhomes, I think because of affordability, they'll have their share, and they'll be pretty steady for that property. Anyway, we're bound, given what's going on, the uncertainty with lingering pandemic, along with Ukraine, with the inflation, all of them are tied together and causing uncertainty and inflation and higher interest rates. So we're bound to see, I think, some moderation. I don't think we're falling off the cliff, and I think you're still going to have a good, prosperous year. You're right in the center of the high growth area in the state, and the state ranks second in growth. And so you're well placed, and I think you'll have another good year. Thanks a lot.